Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar Top 10 video. This one is going to be my top 10 favorite or best minor characters from the whole entire Avatar universe. So that's what it is this week, and at the end of the video I'll tell you what the top 10 for next week is going to be. But first of all, like a brief introduction on this topic. One of the things I definitely note about both shows, and I suppose the Avatar universe overall, is that the minor characters are just as interesting as the main characters. Sure, the main characters get to like more development and stuff like that, but you are just as interested in seeing what a lot of these minor characters go through, and so that's why this one is definitely worth doing, because the cast of characters who don't get the massive amount of attention are really unique and interesting, and you just always want to know who they are when they come back and what they're about. And they are like basically loved enough by the fandom where if they appear in an episode, we know who they are. There's never like, wait, who's that character? Which episode were they from? We know exactly who they are. And it says a lot that our fandom it's probably one of those only fandoms where like nearly everyone in the fandom knows who every minor character is, so that says a lot about them. Now, in terms of who is and who's excluded from this list, what is a minor character? It's kind of hard to really specify that. What I've tried to do here is basically take a group of characters who, some of them are like one shot, they only appear in one episode, a couple of scenes. Some of them are really recurring characters who, you know, they're not main characters, don't really have an arc, they just appear from time to time. Plus some more, I suppose, well-known characters who don't just get enough screen time. I have left a couple out that you may think make this list, like Avatar 1 would probably make this list, Rava would, but the reason I don't include them on this list is because I felt like those two characters basically got 2 episodes to themselves. Beginnings were one and Rava's episodes, and I'd probably have them super high on my mind on this list if I didn't exclude them, and so I'm leaving them out because they did basically get, like, in essence, like a TV movie to themselves with beginnings and stuff like that. Characters like Jinora, who isn't the most main character, but I would probably class her as more of a kind of more lower end main character slash supporting character rather than a minor character. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. Not going for the characters who have a massive amount of screen time, but I'm also excluding some characters from the list who do have, you know, don't appear in the show as much as you would think. But that's a little bit confusing explanation, so let's just get into the top 10 list with my number 10 favorite best minor character. Number 10 is Gamu from The Legend of Korra. This guy is great. You know, he appears in the first episode. He appears again towards the end of season 1, and we see him a couple of times, you know, after that. Mainly noted for, you know, obviously appearing in the kind of intro to book 4, Friends with the Spirits, that type of thing. But this guy is just super interesting because he's obviously a character that Korra meets at the start of the series, and he's the one who kind of helps her to realize that not everything's perfectly fine in Republic City. But this guy's actually okay with that. He's fine with not having a house, roof over his head. He's fine, you know, living in a bush and all this other stuff. And then by the end, you know, in a book all about equality, he's kind of revealed to be the guy that's the most open to everyone. He creates this bender, non-bender kind of safe haven underground in the sewers, basically. And they live together in harmony. And kind of shows the way that, you know, Amon trying to do this whole get equality through taking out one side, Tarlok trying to do the same, when this guy has more of the idea. And then, like, when basically we knew going into book 2 that we were basically going to have, like, a president of the United Republic, that was going to be the big thing, the big change in book 2, I was almost expecting that they would do some sort of a plot where Raiko would run against, like, Gamu or something like that for the presidency, and, like, Korra would be supporting Gamu despite being a little bit of an oddball, and they do something like that, but they didn't go down that road. But you can tell that Korra has a decent amount of respect for this guy. And then he's one of the only characters who we see who's like super friendly with the spirits, who's not like one of the spiritual characters really. So this guy can get along with anyone. I'd love to see what he's up to, like at this point in time now that Korra's over. Does he go into the spirit world? Is he one of the guys who really helps like make that relationship between humans and spirits good? So I think he's interesting. There's a lot more that they could do with him, and just he was just a fun character as well. So that's my number 10. But let's move on to number 9. Number 9 is Chit-Sang from Avatar The Last Airbender. So here's a minor character who only appears really in, one arc and is with the group for like a little bit after that. And he's obviously mainly known for the Boiling Rock episodes. He's one of the Fire Nation prisoners in there. He's a firebender. But the interesting thing about him is that despite all these escape attempts and, knows all the thing about prison, he seems very experienced. He fundamentally seems like a pretty good guy. He doesn't like being in prison, causes a lot of trouble for the guards, but he doesn't really show anything in the episodes where you're like, I don't like that Sokka's teaming up with this guy. I really don't like the idea of him being with our heroes, because he seems fairly nice overall. Like, once he realized that they were escaping, he joined the team. He had a little bit of a selfish moment where, that he wouldn't wait for Hakoda and stuff like that. But I really want to know what this guy did. Where this guy went after the group split up. Because of, the cave-in, I think, at the start of 316. I'd really just like to know where he is now. Has he gotten away from whatever life of crime he had? Has Team Avatar had an impact on this guy? And just what's he doing now? He was just such a kind of charismatic character despite being in only such a few episodes. He was kind of the perfect kind of supporting character to have in the Boiling Rock episodes. And, if we ever saw this guy again in the comics, that would be a wonderful thing to bring back if they ever need some help in something. That would be really cool to see. But that's probably one of the more really minor characters in the series I have on my list. So let's move on to number 8. Number 8 is Foamy Mouth Guy. So definitely one of the most well-known minor characters. And that realistically, we see this guy twice. We see this guy twice in the series. We see him once in Warriors of Kyoshi, and then once again when, they kind of return back there, but Aang isn't there. And it's such an interesting kind of character, just the way he just freaks out every time. And he's not really interesting because we don't know anything about him as a character. He just lives on Kyoshi Island and freaks out when he sees the Avatar, kind of celebrities, that sort of thing. But just the way that this guy can get himself so excited about something that he foams at the mouth is fascinating. It's an interesting thing. I just like to know, just to get this guy explaining why he's so excitable. Is he aware of this whole foaming at the mouth thing? And then, even the way they made the joke the second time, he's about to do it, and he's just like, what? He's not here? I got foamed up for nothing? Aw. And then they kind of reference it again when, I think Team Avatar foams at the mouth. I think Kaya does it in Korra at some point as well when they see something shocking happen. So they've used it again, they've referenced it, and I just like to know what this guy's doing right now. He's probably one of the characters on my list who has the least potential for anything going forward. When we see this guy again, apart from the joke, the gag, what are they really going to do with this guy? But still, he's definitely worth a place on my list. One of the more memorable, just really super minor characters. But let's move on to number 7. Number 7 is probably the character who has appeared in his series the most, and that's Meelo. Now, maybe some will argue that he's not really a minor character, but I think of all the Air Kids, Ikki and Meelo are minor, while Jinora is kind of supporting, almost main character. She's definitely on a kind of level above her two her brother and sister. But I chose Meelo above Ikki just because I felt like they gave him a bit more character. They attempted to give Ikki some character in, I think episode 4 or 5, episode 4 of book 4. But Meelo, I think, over all 4 books, he just had these various moments. He was crazy, he was absurd, but he was a surprisingly amazing airbender for his age. We then learned that he has these amazing art skills, that he's a bit crazy, aggressive, but still super skilled. And I just I just think that this is a character who, like, if we followed his journey, would be super interesting because he straight away has a kind of built in, like, way to get his tattoos in terms of you have to invent a new airbending skill unique to your own. And this guy already has it built in, with fart bending, like he already has that. And it's not just like this really gimmicky technique, it works. Like, he can use that technique in battle and it works perfectly fine. And I think that's one of the most notable things about him is that he kind of is an airbending prodigy. Like, I would almost say that by the time he's around Janora's age, he probably will be one of the characters who probably gets his tattoos first. The only thing that will probably maybe hold him back is his kind of craziness and stuff like that. But in terms of sheer skill and talent, he's probably right up there. So I'd be really interested to see what Meelo is like when he's older. Because I can imagine him just being the most amazing airbender ever and just having this really unique personality once he's older. So I think he has so much potential, and just if they do core comics, I'd love to see him as, like, older and see what he's kind of really about. He was maybe a bit too focused on in terms of comedy and showing how random he is, that he didn't really get to come out so much as a character. But I still think there's so much potential there. So that's Meelo as number 7. So let's move on to number 6. Number 6 is Longshot from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, it's interesting because we've only heard this guy say basically one line in the show. And he appeared in the comics again, but he was, again, a super minor character there. But of all the freedom fighter characters, I think, after Jet, he's definitely the most interesting one in that, we don't really learn a lot about him. He has a similar story to most of the freedom fighters in that, the Fire Nation, basically led to their family or town being destroyed. And, there's this guy who just doesn't talk, but everyone around him who knows him reasonably well knows what he's saying just from a look. And I think just that idea, there's so much potential in terms of how you write a character, for just a couple of episodes focusing on him and a couple of characters around him. Just doing that a couple of times, maybe have him speak a little bit more and really find out what he's about. Because you could really see towards, like, the end of his involvement in the series, like, he and Smellerbee went along with, Jet, and how they were there basically when Jet died, and, like, he was ready to defend, Jet from anyone who maybe came along. There's always the speculation of, like, did Longshot put Jet out of his misery because he was so badly injured. I just think there's a lot of potential there, and like, as I said, his story has been continued in The Promise, and he was part of the kind of Smellerbee-led freedom fighters, but we didn't really see where they went from there. So I'd like to see him come back because he seems on reasonably good terms with Team Avatar, and I just think there's a lot of potential there for just having this guy speak a little bit more, maybe address, his relationship with Smellerbee. They seem to be hinting perhaps at something more romantic there, so I'd like to see where he and I suppose Smellerbee as well go. So that's why Longshot makes my list. A very cool character. Archer characters are always interesting as well. Using a bow and arrow, that's great. So yeah, let's move on to number 5. Number 5 is Senna from The Legend of Korra. This is obviously Korra's mother. And yeah, minor character. I chose her over Tonraq because I do think Tonraq got a little bit more time, a little bit more focus. He got a bit of backstory. Senna didn't, but she really impressed me in the very few scenes that she was in the entire show. Just in terms of our first time getting to see the parents of an Avatar, it really came across very well here with Senna. You could see that Korra, has a lot in common with her father. They're very athletic. They're almost these really highly trained athletes, benders. You can see where Korra gets a lot of her kind of inspiration from and stuff like that. You can really see that Tonraq is definitely Korra's father, but Senna really helps Korra with the kind of emotional side of things. She often goes to her mother for a more emotional side of things. You see that in like the Civil Wars episodes. You see that Senna's primarily the one looking after Korra during the 3 years that she's kind of out of action. You see that before she goes to see Katara. And just played that really good role of just this kind of emotional supporting character to Korra in the series. But I think what they kind of missed a big opportunity with was to explore Senna as a bender, because we know it's canon that Senna is a waterbender. Whether she's a healer or she can actually fight, we don't really know. But she's from the southern tribe, so we assume she probably has some fighting experience. And again, that there's potential to just further explain the story of how she and Tonrock met, first of all. You can then... I think they almost missed an opportunity in Book 3 to have Senna and Tonrock kind of defend Korra in the kind of big fight at the end, because that would have been really cool to get to see the whole family kind of fighting together. But they definitely gave Senna a more kind of a emotional support character role, but there's still a lot of potential, I think, going forward. Like, I think a good idea would maybe be to have Senna be a healer in the series and establish that maybe she's tried to treat Korra but realizes that, you know, Katara is the best healer in the world. She's the one who can maybe help her this next step of the journey. So I just loved the voice actor for Senna was great, and I just love to see more of what she's about, more of her relationship with Korra, more of her relationship with Tonrock, and what their thoughts were on, you know, their daughter being the Avatar and stuff like that. So just they really nailed, you know, Korra's parents here, first Avatar parents we had in the series. So that's why she makes my list, and it's placed so highly on the list as well. But we'll move on to number 4. Number 4 is a character who probably tops a lot of people's minor character list, and that is the Cabbage Merchant from Avatar: The Last Airbender. He's probably the funniest, you know, just recurring, you know, funny joke character in the series in terms of, like, that's all he does. He just appears, says my cabbages, his cabbage stall gets destroyed by Team Avatar in a really random and funny way in the middle of a fight, and he's just saddened by this. And you don't really get much on his character. And in that way, like, if I was just doing it off Avatar: The Last Airbender, he probably would be 7th on my list, just a little bit above Foamy Mouth Guy, because they're just there for jokes. There's not really much character to them. But they did something different with Cabbage Merchant, in that they had him go somewhere. They kind of gave him a character arc, in that in Korra they established that he invented this Cabbage Corp, started making kind of cheap machinery, cheap cars, and just made a name for himself with this. And, you know, the statue of the Cabbage Merchant, they just established this kind of canon legacy for this really just random character in the series, and that was really cool, that he has invented this corporation that's really big in the city. But I suppose one of the main reasons I have him so high on my list is the comics. This guy appears in the Rift comic, and it's a really cool appearance because he talks a lot more. You get a bit on the Cabbage Merchant's character in this story, in that he's moved away from having a cabbage stall that he rolls around the place to now having a cabbage shop set up in this one place. It's basically a restaurant selling all these cabbage-themed dishes. And so Team Aang brings the Air Acolytes in there to have to basically go through with their kind of ritual. It's the most kind of calm place in the city to do it. And when he sees Aang walk in, he's like, no, please, don't destroy the place again. You've already kind of like destroyed this stuff enough. And he knows exactly who Aang is. He knows that Aang and Team Avatar have been the ones who's destroyed his stall all the times. You know, I think he understands kind of by accident, but like that something bad's going to happen with Aang around. But Aang has no idea who this guy is. They have just been so oblivious to the fact that they've destroyed this guy's cabbage stall multiple times. And I thought that was brilliant, this idea that Team Avatar just has no idea who he is, while he knows exactly who they are. But then they just kind of, you know, nothing really happens, you know, like they buy some food from him, you know, help his business, they just sit there peacefully. You know, eventually something happens, but it doesn't quite destroy his shop. And then, most of all, what this did was it set up where Cabbage Corp comes from. He sees Satoru's machines that he's been making, and suddenly becomes super interested in that, and tries to basically start a business with Satoru as kind of like his kind of chief of technology. So we don't have the full explanation for how Cabbage Corp starts, but it's just that hint right away. You see the moment where the idea goes into the cabbage merchant's head, and I think that was really cool. And so the fact that they continued on his story and have set up that they're probably going to address maybe the next step in his story is super interesting for me, and I'm so glad that they went the step further with the Cabbage Merchant, and that's why he places so highly on my list. But let's move into the top three now. Number three. Number three is Sookie from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, she's again kind of like Meelo, a character who is a kind of focused character. She's one of the really named. She's not really an obscure character in that she's a member of Team Avatar at the end of the series, but she doesn't appear in that many episodes, so she is a minor character in the grand scheme of things. And I like how basically she's a character who the fans made into a character bigger than she was, and that, as far as I'm aware, Mike and Brian have said in the past, I think that Sookie was originally only meant to be in the Warriors of Kyoshi, but because of how well the fandom received her and the relationship with Sokka and how well that went, they brought her back because she was so beloved and actively brought her into the series, gave her a plot, and made her joining Team Avatar a thing. So she may be the least developed member of Team Avatar, but she's still a member of Team Avatar and she works really cool. She's a Kyoshi warrior, she's really skilled. The relationship with Sokka is really nice, and they've addressed that a little bit in the comics. But I'd kind of like to see her get a little bit more focus of her own, not just be like the B or C plot of a comic. That she's almost key part of one of the main plots in a comic. So I think they need to do something where they really address kind of where Sookie and Sokka went at the end of the series, because Korra, the only real future of characters that they didn't address were Sookie and Sokka in terms of Team Avatar. So I think there's potential there, and they've clearly not told us that stuff for a reason. So I think they're probably going to do something more with these in the future in the comics, and I'm excited to see that. So definitely Sookie, just a really awesome, strong female character who the fans made into a really big thing, and that's really cool to see. So yeah, let's move on to number two now. Number two is King Bumi from Avatar: The Last Airbender. This guy, I think in many ways is why people love Avatar minor characters so much. They're just these characters who are allowed to be a little bit more kind of crazy, a little bit more kind of odd personalities, and King Bumi represents that so well, because in addition to that, he's kind of important because he's like the only living person from Aang's time. So he was friends with Aang before the 100 Years in Ice, and he's friends with Aang after that. So it's just this interesting dynamic that Aang missed like 100 years of this guy's life, yet because Bumi's so kind of odd, he kind of hasn't moved on from that, and so they're still friends. It's a really cool relationship in that sense. And then just the idea that this guy became king, and he's like 112 years old, and he's one of the most powerful earthbenders in the world. It's absurd, but it works because of his mad personality, and just that episode, the King of Amashu, just is so fun. And then he appears again. You think straight away he has to be Aang's earthbending teacher, but he reveals these kind of moments of wisdom. He's a member of the Order of the White Lotus. He knows that Aang needs a better teacher than him, so he kind of references kind of Toph and starts that whole journey. He's just a really cool character, and like in terms of other stuff they can talk about, maybe like tell some stories about how did this guy become king. Like they didn't really make any mention in the flashbacks where they showed Aang and Bumi's friendship that he was like a prince or anything like that. He was set to become king. There's any royalty in Omashu. So how did this guy become king? Like, when did he learn, full on earthbending and become so powerful? And then maybe how did he join the Order of White Lotus? There's some interesting stories you can tell with King Bumi still. And yeah, I I just think he's such a unique character, and that's why he places so highly on my list. But let's move on to number one. Number one, of course, is Carrot Guy. And, um, I kind of had to choose him, just because I've made such a big deal about talking about him so much. But I really do find this spirit shaped like a carrot interesting, because he was kind of like one of the spirits that kind of Juan was kind of friends with. He's the spirit who gives him and his friend, like Turnip Lad or whatever you want to call him, give Juan the kind of cup of tea or something like that. And then he appears later on with kind of when Korra asks the spirits for help, but doesn't do anything. Like, we haven't heard this guy talk. But this is a spirit who's been around 10,000 years. Like, he was there with Juan, he's there with Korra. This is a long-lasting spirit. And then just the idea of, like, what does a spirit shaped like a carrot do? Like, what's he the spirit of? Which brings up sort of questions like, are the spirits meant to have, like, full-on roles? We know that certain spirits are like, Heibai is the guardian of this forest, the Painted Lady is the guardian of this river / town. Ko, the mother of faces, is all about, faces, identities. Ko is all about the kind of opposite of that, stealing people's faces, identities. But what's the carrot spirit guy like? What's the deal with that? And they're probably never going to do anything of note with him, but just I thought the idea of this guy was so absurd, and I made a big deal about it very early on, and maybe made him into like a bigger deal than he actually was, and completely helped by like Brian also mentioning that he loves Carrot Guy as well. Brian Kinesco dressing up as Carrot Guy as well, cosplay, just made him really into a big deal. So maybe my number one pick is a bit of a kind of like not really that big of a deal, but I just had to pick Carrot Guy just to keep the legend going. This spirit is awesome, and that's why he places so highly on my list. And there's definitely the potential to see him again, because the one of the things left unresolved from Korra was the whole spirit thing, that Korra asked for help from the spirits, they didn't help her, and they just left it at that in the series, and the series ended with that. So that has to be something they returned to, and they made a note that Carrot Guy was there with Korra, so maybe he will be one of the ones to change his mind, knowing what Juan did and stuff like that. But anyway, that's the end of the list. So, what's my top 10 going to be for next week? So next week, the top 10 I'm going to be doing is top 10 kind of, how do I say this? It's kind of like, basically top 10 things that I want to see in the future of Avatar. Kind of top 10 unanswered plots, unanswered mysteries. But primarily it's kind of like the top 10 facts or stories I want to be told in the Avatar universe going forward. The kind of top 10 answers to questions that I actually want. Like, if Mike and Brian came up to me and said, we're going to tell you 10 things about the Avatar universe, we won't hold anything back, what are those things that I'd ask, basically? So that's what I'm going to be talking about next week. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this top 10 list of minor characters. What are your favourite minor characters? Were there any ones you thought you disagreed with or disagreed with on my list? Other than that, thanks for watching this video, and bye.